welcome back. Still watching Business Morning here on Channels Television. Now, looking into Nigeria now, the International Labour Organization has disclosed that the micro, small and medium enterprises, that's the MSMEs, contribute 48% of Nigeria's national gross domestic product. They account for 96% of businesses and 84% of employment in the country. That means if Nigeria is talking about development or growing its GDP, then attention must be given to the MSMEs. Yesterday we talked about smallholder farmers. I mean, they are part of this picture, and sometimes it seems they're just at the bottom there. Meanwhile, they do hold very important place in food security, in manufacturing, in employment, and mopping up against insecurity in the country. Well, let's dwell on this with Daniel Foley. He's the founder and chief executive officer of SoftLink AI. He joins us virtually to have this conversation. Good morning, Mr. Foley. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Good morning, Amy. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so when we look at the MSMEs, we've had a lot. I mean, we have SMEDAN and a whole lot of agencies. We have plans, or we have heard of plans, for funding, which seems to be a major part of their problems. But let's be real now and look at MSMEs in Nigeria. What are they looking like? What is their state of health at this time?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say because this is a very, very broad audience you're talking about. We all know that, with the war in Ukraine, many SMEs, also in Nigeria, also affected in the sense that the inputs that they need to produce their goods and services, all of a sudden has gone up, right? And so they're suffering from that. However, opportunities are there. The thing with SMEs is that they're very resilient, right? Especially Nigerian entrepreneurs. And so we're confident that, in the end, everything, will be well. However, in terms of loans and access to funds, that is still a big problem, because the reality is this: you can, if you want to maintain the status quo as a business, you can continue to turn over, right? So just turn over what you earn, keep some profit, pay employees. But if you want to grow, growth always requires funding, right? And access to funding is still a major problem on the continent. And I think that it's about time that we do something about it as a country.
Well, but we've heard a lot of things being done about it. We have SMEDAN, for instance, and some other agencies. We've seen efforts to encourage, both from the private and the public sector, to encourage small businesses, startups. Are you saying these efforts are not effective or they are not enough?
Okay, so I mean, that's a very good question. The thing with efforts is the current efforts that we have, they are good, but they're not enough, right? If you look at the population, right, in the grand scheme of things, the numbers of SMEs and SMEs that exist in Nigeria is over 50 million, right? And when you look at the opportunities to funding, there is still a very big problem. So we have SMEDAN, like you said, we have the likes of Tony Nimelu Foundation, we have other foundations that have also, helped with different grants and different opportunities to give SMEs to funding. But what you would find out is, there's a problem. So I'll analyze the problem for you. So if you look at SMEs, there are two ways we can look at it. We can look at startups and we can look at SMEs. So a startup is a small business in terms of the amount of people, required to start a technology startup company. Usually 2 or 3 founders can start a company, right? However, the difference between a technology startup, right, and the SME, our usual SME, is the fact that a tech startup is designed to scale fast, right? The whole idea of a startup is to build a product that can scale nationally and globally, right, and do significant revenue in a very short period of time. And that's what gives the startup, a very unique opportunity. We've seen, the likes of Uber, Airbnb, we've seen the likes of Paystack and Flutterwave, typically rise from almost nothing. No one saw them coming, and they took the market by the storm. Now, the problem with this category of startups, right, which I also run a startup, SoftLink.ai, is the fact that locally, there is very little opportunity in terms of access to funding. If you look at the successful technology startup companies on the continent, majority of them, 90 to 95% of them, actually got their startup capital, their funding, right, from the US or from the UK, or from the international space. We do not have enough, Nigerians making investments in technology startup companies. Yes, I know we have the likes of the Lagos Investment, Network, Lagos Angels Network, and then we have a couple of, accelerators here and there. But by the time you look at the source of funding for many of these accelerators, it's also international. Okay, and so that is something that we're hoping that with the Startup Act that the federal government just passed, and then incentivizing angel investment in technology company, which is something that we need to do, and we need to use policies as an instrument to make that. If I'm a salary earner and I've done very well, or I am an high net worth individual, right, and high net worth individual, what incentive is the federal government giving me, or is the government giving me, to invest in a high risk technology startup company? And I have to use the word high risk because, of course, an investment, nobody likes to throw money away, and we know that technology startups, are high risk. A startup can start today, fold up in the next 12 months, and the money is gone, and that's okay. That's part of development and innovation. And so we need to find ways to implement policies that incentivize high net worth individuals in the country to actually make investment in their own technology startup company. Now on the other hand, you have the the SMEs. Now usually the right place for SMEs to get funding is not to go to angel investors can help, yes, but not to go to accelerators, or to go to take, for instance, private equity firms. No, usually the best source of funding to a large extent for SMEs and MSMEs is actually the bank. So you find out that we don't have banks doing enough in terms of, you want to take a loan of 10 million naira, the bank will ask you to go and bring, your great grandfather's, land title, and all those long list of criteria. Now, how can we fix this? Because this is a problem that has lasted, for many years, and the banks seem, to be doing nothing. However, the foundation of the problem is the fact that the banks understand the limitations and the challenges that these MSMEs face. One of those limitations is importation of goods, right? We know that Nigeria has a very high GDP, but you find out that 80 to 90% of our GDP are actually, foreign goods entering into the country that we are consuming. And so what the banks understand is that even if you are bringing in some goods, from China or from anywhere, if you get stuck at the port, there's a problem with whatever loan they have given you. Right, and so you may not be able to pay back, on that kind of loan. They also understand that you have, challenges in terms of, e-commerce. You have challenges in terms of, shipping these goods from one place to the other. Okay, and so they know that there's a problem with you having, selling that goods. Now the bank also know that we don't have a consumer credit, right, as a nation. And so even if you have the goods, the audience, your target audience, may not have the required, resources or disposable income to buy your goods and services in the way you have estimated, on your projections. And so they understand that, look, they look at that business, and all of a sudden what they see is just risk. So what we can do, and what I think, the Nigerian government has been able to do, and we've done now, is the fact that the foundation of these problems, are now being fixed with, the likes of the new Lekki Deep Seaport that will help with the seaport. We have the Lekki Free Trade Zone right now that will help with local content manufacturing, and I think that if those problems are taken away, which of course the Lekki Free Trade Zone is there, the Deep Seaport has been commissioned, the Lagos State as an economic hub is now having its own interrail, system. So with all of those, being sorted, and we hope that the next government now can build on that and create consumer credit, the banks now begin to see SMEs, as a very viable partner in terms of a customer in terms of loans, and at the same time they want to partner more with them and give generous loans, right? So that we can make sure that most SMEs not only maintain status quo but are actually growing and can employ more people. That is how we're going to create more employment in the country.
Yeah, so I know you are in the technology, ICT, and tech, so that's why you are, really focusing on that. But, you also have the other aspect, which is also important, the MSMEs that are involved in agricultural value chain, because food insecurity is a big challenge facing the country at this time. And I know you talked about the issue of exports and all of that, but maybe if we look inwards first and see what's happening in the value chain with MSMEs. Some people have the notion that a great idea will always attract the right investment and funding, so the issue of funding shouldn't be there. So what do you see in this area?
Yeah, thank you, Ine. So you see, food security is a very big challenge, especially for African leaders who have to deal with growing population, food security issues, and industrialization all at the same time. So, one would expect that this is something that we've done, we should have done many years before now. However, what these SMEs need to do, right? And if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, is the fact that let's take for instance, look at the food that is coming, to the Nigerian consumer, for instance. You find out that we have, raw food. So people go to the market, you buy, your raw tomatoes, you buy your yam fresh from the farm and all that. Maybe these things maybe come from different parts of the nation and then they are distributed. That is the current, value chain that we have, or that is the current supply chain that we have. However, some of those things need to be modernized in the way it's done. Take for instance, many of the businesses that are involved in farming, right, and in food produce now need to start thinking of forward or backward integration, in the sense that we need to start looking at our tomatoes and saying, okay, look, how can we convert this tomato into ketchup? We need to look at some of this food produce, because again, the current value chain that we have and the current supply chain that we have in the food, sector is the fact that we also have a lot of waste based on this current design. You see, some tomatoes in the process of transportation before they arrive, at the point of sale, those tomatoes are already rotten. Okay, so we have waste in this current system that we're running. And so the way to reduce that waste is by food processing, which is forward integration, a next step forward, right? And there are lots of businesses in Nigeria, I would say. I know you're talking about the MSMEs, but, some of these MSMEs, of course, pick items from some farmers who, are maybe large-scale farmers or, small-scale farmers. In any way, there is need to now begin to add food processing into the value chain to reduce waste, and that is also going to require funding. So if you look at it, it's more like a chicken and egg issue, right? You need funding, to save more, right, and produce more quality food, because again, we can also come into the subject of quality and hygiene in terms of the current supply chain. So the current supply chain is there, but it's not perfect. It needs to be improved on, and capital needs to come in to make that happen.
Yeah, well, the issue of quality is another subject matter. But so it doesn't look like it's all gloomy, when it comes to MSMEs. At least we have one thing working for us in Nigeria. The market is there. Once you can scale through and have a product, then you are sure of a market.
Yes, you're 100% right. It's not gloomy at all, and I would say that it's actually bright, right? Brighter than it has ever been. And I say this with all sense of duty, because if you look at it, number one is the Nigerian entrepreneurs are passionate, right? Nigerian entrepreneurs are hardworking, they're passionate, and they put their hearts to the business. So that is working for us. So no matter the storm or the challenges, we are able to weather it because of grit. The other part, right, is in terms of infrastructure development that we are having as a nation. So let me tell you what has been happening, Ini, and I think this might help break it down a bit. One of the things we do not know, maybe many people don't know, especially as a country, is the fact that over the last 50, 60 years, the moment Nigeria got more productive, Nigeria got poorer. Okay, I'll say that again. Nigeria got got poorer when we got more productive, and I'll tell you why. Any good and anything productive has an energy cost attached to it. So if you look at a product like this, for instance, right, it has an energy cost attached to it. And so if you look at that, when you make a phone call, there's an energy cost attached. When you produce, a cup or anything, you have an energy cost attached to it. Okay, and so with that, what that means is that if you want to be productive, right, if you look at the foundation of Nigeria's sorry, hold on a second. Okay, sorry. So if you look at our productivity, the problem has always been the fact that every productive efforts that we have, there's an energy cost attached, and with that energy, we do not produce our own refined petroleum product. So what that means is that we always have to import, fuel, and that way we are exporting our productivity, the gains that we're supposed to have from our productivity. And so what we need to do, which is what has been done already, is the Dangote refinery, making sure that the moment Nigeria got productive, right, that wealth stays in this country. Right, and that is something that's going to help us.
Daniel, thank you so much. I was hoping we could have that conversation without talking about oil and gas, because it seems Nigeria begins and ends with oil and gas, and sometimes that can be, heartbreaking, because we've been talking about diversifying the economy, even though some people say we've diversified the economy, but the source of revenue is what we have not diversified. But thank you so much, Daniel Foley, for joining us and sharing your thoughts this morning. Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Softlink.ai.
Thank you, Ine, for having me.
Let's take a break now. When we come back, it will be commodities time.